Welcome this evening to the Kickstart Your Career in Communications online event. Thank you to Adam and Finlay, who have basically done all the hard work for this, and all I am is just someone that just chats a lot. But it's a very warm welcome, because normally I would see you in Westminster at events over a glass of champagne, and boy, do I miss that. And instead we're stuck at home waiting for that moment to come back to us. And especially as you are progressing in your careers, it's harder than ever, and people do appreciate that, and that's what this event is about. Because normally you can pick up info, intel, relationship build through osmosis. Really, you find out how to progress when you're looking at other people in a sector, see what they do, see the successes they have, and work out your way forward. And it's just so much harder at home, whether or not it's your mum's spare bedroom, whether or not it's your one bedroom flat, whether or not it's a mansion in the country. It's just hard for us all to be able to do that, especially in a career which is so people-based and so based on networking as well. So today this is about how you can progress your career, how you can build those relationships. We have breakout sessions, and you would have elected either your first or second preference before this meeting, and that would have been assigned to you. So at some point you will join your breakout session so that you can have more of an intimate discussion around some of the questions you might want to raise or ask. But don't be scared this evening. Don't hold back. This is about interaction, and it's about getting something from the event and from the panelists who have kindly given up so much of their time today. What I wanted to say first of all is I'm Katie Perrier. I chair in-house communications. I'm the former director of comms at number 10 Downing Street, and I'm hiring. So please check me out on LinkedIn. It'll be great to hear from you. Send your CVs over if you're interested in kind of career moves. Colvie has put his hand up. I can only dream of hiring you, Colvie. It'd be like back to the good old days. I don't believe you for a minute, but I'm going to introduce a couple of people from the panel. And also there is a mentoring scheme that's just about to kick off, and Finley's got the details. He'll put it in the chat function, but we will remind you about it at the end, and do ask questions about it if you are interested. So I'm going to call on our panelists first. Colvie, since you were so kindly put your hand up earlier, can you just introduce yourself, and I'll go around to the panelists and people that are hosting the breakout sessions to make sure that we know who we're speaking to this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And I'd be delighted to work for you again. Like, it'd be like we never stopped. And in one way, we never stopped working for each other or our former boss, as we all remember. But look, hi, everyone. And I'm really excited to be part of this. Again, thanks to Finlay and Adam and Conservatives in Communications for putting it on. Really exciting. Great to bring you all together in these challenging times. My intro, look, I've spent 25 years and somehow ended up in this job of looking after global strategy and communications for a rather large technology business called Atos. And it's been a wonderful journey getting there. It's involved being in the private sector, it's involved being in the public sector, it's involved the whole dollop of politics, but it's never been a linear route. And I've worked all sides, actually. I've worked in agency and in-house. So look, lots to discuss, happy to take questions, probe, prompt, ask me, the difficult ones, the ones you're not sure about. I won't have all the answers, but I'll give it my best shot. Look forward to talking to you through the next hour.
Thank you, Colvie. Paul Holmes, I've lost you on my screen somewhere, but I believe you are here somewhere. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Katie. I'm here, and thank you to everyone at CiC for organising this, and thanks for the invitation. My name's Paul Holmes. I'm the Member of Parliament for Eastleigh. I was elected in December 2019, but thankfully for all of you in the room, I have a background in comms. Before being elected, I was an account manager at Portland Communications, and then moved in to become a special advisor to Patrick McLaughlin, Damien Hines and Damien Green. And then my last job before being elected was Group Head of Public Affairs at Clarion Housing Group. So I do have a background in this. I'm looking forward to talking to everybody in this room, and for once, for a politician, you can ask me any question and I will give you an honest answer. So thank you for the invitation.
The opportunity for lobbyists over the next hour is immense. So get your questions in ready and waiting. Anita, can I go to you next, please?
Thanks, Katie, and hi, everyone. I hope you can all hear and see me okay. Please indicate if you can't. So I'm delighted to be here too, and I totally support what this session is going to be about, which is really kind of delivering that practical advice for you guys wanting to get on in communications. So a bit of my background, I started up in Parliament, like I'm sure many of you did too, and I then went to work on Question Time, the BBC programme, and lots of other quite exciting political debate programmes. And then I made the jump over to be a special advisor and ended up being a special advisor to 3 different ministers across 5 different departments, and then made the jump to agency. So I'm a senior director at FTI Communications, which is a huge global US-based consultancy firm.
Excellent, thank you. And Alec, can I get you to introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Katie, very much. I guess I come at this slightly differently to some of the other panelists in that I've never worked in comms and advocacy myself, but I have worked in the recruitment of comms and advocacy professionals for best part of a decade. So prior to working for Elwood Outfield, where I currently work, I worked for Michael Page, and previous to that for Pub Affairs, the largest network of public affairs people in the UK. So yeah, slightly different angle, but hopefully can still offer some helpful advice.
Thank you. That's really good of you to run us through some of the career backgrounds and things. I'm going to just ask the panelists, in terms of the breakout session panelists, to just introduce themselves now. Samantha, can we go with you first, please?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see so many different faces. I feel like I've come close to leaving my house almost in the experience. So it's great to see all of you and see you like taking a proactive step in your careers in coming here. So like Anita and so many people, I also started my career in Parliament working for Karen Bradley, and then took the step into agency, decided I really liked comms and I really liked politics, and I kind of wanted to marry the two. So I moved into the civil service and worked at the Cabinet Office for just over 2 years, I think about 2.5 years, first as a press officer and then as a press secretary to the Leader of the House of Commons. That was Andrea Leadsom, Mel Stride, and then for 2 days, Jacob Rees-Mogg, before I decided to follow Andrea into Bayes as her special advisor. And now I work as an associate director at Hanover, covering both comms and advocacy, and do a little bit of kind of writing for the Jewish Telegraph as a columnist, and sometimes elsewhere if they'll have me.
Fantastic. And Naomi, can I get you to introduce yourself too?
Thank you, Katie. Yes, hi everyone. My name's Naomi. I didn't start my career off in Parliament. I actually started my career off in local journalism. And then the financial crash happened and the money went out of newspapers, and I jumped ship to the CBI, where I worked there in London and then in Brussels, before moving into consultancy about a decade ago. Started off at Newington, where I ended up as the Chief Operating Officer. Then took a bit of a career break and am now at WA Communications as a director. Very pleased to meet you all, and I look forward to seeing you in the agency breakout session.
Thank you. And finally, but not last but not least, Aisha, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, really happy to be here. My name is Asia Cuthbert, and kind of like Naomi, actually started in journalism, but in TV and radio, and I worked for a Canadian company called Global TV. And then when I moved over here, I actually started working in some agencies, doing PR and lobbying. And currently I am head of corporate communications, like Paul, in housing prior to winning his election victory. And I'm also a local councillor, so I've got a little bit of the local politics thing going on as well. So looking forward to speaking to you all.
Great, that's wonderful, thank you. Now my chat box on the right here on my screen is meant to start filling up with questions from you guys for the panellists. And just reminding the panellists at the moment are Paul Holmes, Anita Botang, Colby Ranger and Alex Zeta. And of course, you then go into your breakout sessions. So do fill up that with questions, otherwise you're gonna have to listen to me bore on for the next 20 minutes. And that's no fun for anybody. And you're meant to be here to be asking questions that are gonna further your career. So you might have something in the back of your mind thinking, can I? Can't I? Do I really want to say that? Do I want to embarrass myself? There is no naughty, bad, ridiculous, rubbish question. Just fill up the chat box. It'd be lovely to get your questions in. So in the meantime, I'm going to kick off and I'm going to speak to Paul, just in terms of if you're looking very scared, Paul, don't worry. I'm not going to frighten you. As a kick-off question, in the next few years with the Tories in government, how can Conservatives, whether or not it's communicators, lobbyists. How can we take advantage of the next few years in terms of the network that we have, the network that you worked in before you became into Parliament, and indeed the one that you now have in Parliament? How can we collectively take advantage of that over the next few years?
Well, thank you, Katie. It's a great question. And you say you're not going to tell me off, but I do distinctly remember that you did want to tell me off when I was a special advisor, and you always terrify me. But there we go. I know you. I've known you since then. It's a really good question, and I think I believe in the old kind of traditional methods. So the first thing is that all of you guys that are on this call tonight are people that have a profession. You are communicators. And I don't think it's wrong to say that sometimes this government has needed the input of outside communicators to make sure that our message gets through. You know, quite often when I speak to the Whip's office, I say, that's fine that you're about to announce this policy, but how are we going to communicate that properly in a clear and concise way to the public? And therefore, I think that it is necessary that many people that work in the industry or are looking for a career in the industry get through to us, because we are more than happy to hear from people who are conservatives, who are communicators, who work in the communications industry, to come through and think, look, I've got a great idea and I want to try and get that through to us. So look, the basic premise, and it sounds like such a ridiculous answer to your question, but the basic premise must be get in touch. Email me, I mean, I'm now a PPS at the Home Office. It's a department that desperately needs some communication strategy. If you think that you've got a way in which we can better communicate our policies or the impact that that's going to have on people, gearing up for a general election in 3 years' time, which government is thinking about, get in touch and we'll put you in touch with the relevant departments, civil servants and the secretaries of state. You know, that's what we need. There has never been a more exciting time for all of you guys on this call to be able to have access to politicians and MPs who are also from a different walk of life, I'd argue. I think the 2019 intake is an intake, I know them very well because I am one of them. They're an intake that are desperate to hear perspectives from outside. They are not people that have had a long background in politics. They're not people that have worked in politics before. I'm a rarity in that. And therefore they're desperate to hear. So, you know, sometimes I know it's quite daunting. You know, I got my job as a special advisor, not by people that I knew, but by emailing directly into the ministers to say, look, actually, I'm a working class councillor, state boy. I think I can communicate this a bit better. And I got appointed. So the one thing that I would say to to everyone on the call is, you know, have a bit of a, not necessarily a background, but be a bit spunky. Get out there and say to these guys, say to these people, look, I think I can help you. Look, sometimes I need help. Sometimes other people need help. Get in touch with us and we'll make sure that I will, as a supporter of CIC and so many other people, will make sure that your emails and the phones, you know, pick up the phones to our offices. We'll get that through and we'll make sure that we use your expertise and experience.
I think that what Paul's saying is don't be shy on asking questions either. The panel the chat box is filling up, so I'm going to put some more questions to the panelists. Thank you for that, Paul. Anita, can I go to you and just ask you about your career in terms of how you continue to network in lockdown, and also how did you find the jump working for an MP and into the career you're into now?
Okay, so on the question about networking, I think the key is that you have to recognize it's not going to be organic. You're not going to be at conference and at the bar and bump into someone and exchange cards and make contacts. Like, that's fine. And everyone knows that. So there's no need you've got to kind of be shameless, just to echo Paul's central message. And that's, I mean, I get lots of messages of people on LinkedIn saying, oh, I thought you did that thing you were talking on BBC, that was interesting, would love to, you know, hear more, or that kind of thing. Like, it can be incredibly unnatural, and that's fine. The other thing I'd say is that people do have more time. So, you know, and you're not asking for a lot for an MP to switch from one Zoom call to another. You're not asking them to traipse across town. You're not asking, you know, a director or someone in public affairs or a think tanker to really commit that much effort into meetings. So you've really got to kind of be a bit shameless and say, you know, I'd love to grab 10 minutes. And the worst thing they can do is say no, and you don't even have to ask to their face. So, you know, that makes things easier. The final thing I'd say, it's like, ask for introductions. It's very hard to organically grow your network. If you know someone that knows someone that you'd like to meet, just ask them to send them an email and copy you in. I think it's worked very well in my industry, in agency, over the past year. And I think actually it could be a really nice blueprint for the future, even when normal service resumes. So don't be shy. On the question about the transition from Parliament, I didn't work for an MP actually. I worked for the PRU, the sort of policy research unit. So that transition was probably the most interesting of the jumps I've made from that into political programming. I loved politics before I loved TV. So for me, they wanted that political expertise and an obsession with, I mean, I did Scottish programs and all sorts of programs. So I found it fairly smooth sailing. I think it's a little harder if you want to go into straight like news stories, because they do want a more impartial, more obviously journalistic voice rather than a more political slant, which is what Question Time tends to be looking for. But if anyone, who the person is that wants to find out more, like, do get in touch with me. Again, on LinkedIn, be shameless.
Quite, I echo those points. Colvia, can I come to you next? A really good question from Robert. Do you think that COVID has changed the skills required in communications? If so, in what way?
Yeah, absolutely. It is a good question because, you know, amongst all the noise and all the challenges we've seen last year, it's not lost us. And I've seen one of the questions talks about poorly executed communications. We've all seen what bad communications looks like, and probably wanted it to be better, do different, as some might say, Adam. But you know, it has absolutely brought to the fore the skill and ability that's required to execute good communications, be strategic, be tactical, have a plan. Now, obviously, the government has been hugely challenged in making its way through this pandemic, and you know, we can all criticize, and they've had to do what they can. But what I have seen is that it's raised the profile of good communicators, right? So where sometimes comms are seen on the edge of a conversation, especially in a business environment, you know, because it's all about the bottom line, it's all about the P&L. And to be honest, in my 25 years in my career, only really 4 years when I was at City Hall working for Boris were they political. I've spent 20 odd years in industry, and I've seen where comms is placed all the way through my career. And it's always finds it hard to get a seat at the top table, except last year and right now, because businesses know that they need to speak to their people, they need to speak to their customers, they need to speak to stakeholders, they need to speak to government, they need to interpret policy, and they need good, skillful communicators who can deliver that. And so the value has shot up. I wrote about this somewhere actually, that the value of the comms industry and comms and good communication people is going right up there, and is increasing in its value as it's perceived within industry as well. So you're all becoming increasingly valuable in your roles and to industry.
Thank you, Colvia. Aisha, I've got a question for you. Well, other panel members, but I think it really does play to your council role and your background. For the panel members who are local councillors, how has this experience improved your skill set?
I think it has immensely. I mean, the industry I work in housing is very political, and like local politics really matters. And they're the ones that decide if we build or not, and approve the planning permissions. And we work with them and their ASB teams. And so we work very, very closely with them. So I can always bring to the forefront, you know, what I would think of a certain plan as a local councillor, what I would think of certain communications. And I always say to my executive team, you know, if we keep residents happy and our customers happy, then our local stakeholders are happy. So I think it's been invaluable really. In my chief executive, I report to him, and, you know, he really values what I have to say. And I can also take some really good communications that housing associations which work in my local area, and I can take those good ideas and I can bring them to my organization. And Paul, I've stole a couple things that Clarion have done, I have to say. But yeah, I think, you know, it really does help. And yeah, I think, you know, the advice is taken, you know, with a great level of respect.
Thank you.
Katie, I should say I'm a local councillor too in London, and so slightly different angle to Naomi, but I don't have an interest in housing in particular. But generally, agencies love if you're a local councillor because you just have a bit more of an understanding of local politics and the way that things kind of filter through how decisions are made at a local level. So if you've got that experience, absolutely exploit it.
I was a local councillor and a cabinet member for 12 years in a London borough, and I've got to say, when I was at number 10, people used to argue with me, and I used to say, no, absolutely not, because I've had this experience on the ground. I've had people tell me face to face that this is a concern. And when once someone got particularly grumpy about something or other, I said, listen, I am the only either former elected or elected person in this room right now. So I trump every one of you, even though it's a lowly local councillor compared to what you lot are kind of banging on about. And they kind of looked at me half as if you're mad, and then half of, yeah, you might have a point here, because you are getting this in your ear from people locally, whilst we are sitting in the Westminster bubble somewhat, and maybe might not be registering it enough. Can I go to you, Alec, next, regarding a question from Olivia, I think it is. Do you think it matters that people don't necessarily have a degree in politics if you're trying to break into a role in political communication?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an old held belief that to start a career in public affairs or communications, you need a politics degree or an economics degree or an English degree or something. And there are unfortunately still organisations out there and hiring managers who probably do still hold that stigma. I think you've got to look at what is it about having that degree that makes you, qualified for the roles that you're going for. A lot of it is around being able to write. It's about being able to research, and politics specifically. It's about understanding how politics works and how legislation is made in the UK. Now, if you can demonstrate that experience from elsewhere, be it internship in Parliament or the parliamentary speaker scheme is a very good example of this, giving opportunities to people without the sort of traditional university route. So I would say no. Unfortunately, I do think there's still some organisations out there that probably will still hold you to that, but it's about the skill set that you get from that degree.
And I completely agree with you. When I'm looking to hire, it's about the can-do attitude and the kind of really enthusiasm to get it done and to work, to work hard and at pace, because politics is not slow. Politics is quick and constantly moving. And I think that, if you want to take 3 weeks to do something and it's not the right career for you, it's about moving quickly and being really excited with a news agenda, I guess. Yeah. Paul, can I come back to you just with another question from John Woodburn around what advice you would give someone who is looking to transition from Parliament or an MP's office to something more focused in communications, especially now people are working from home. It makes it harder to organically grow connections, much like I was talking about earlier in other lines of work, for example. So if anything, any advice you can give on that particular transition, I think would be really helpful.
From moving from an MP's office to agency or another comms role, I think you've automatically, I did exactly that. I worked for Stephen Hammond as a parliamentary researcher in Wimbledon, and then I went off to work at Portland. And you guys, as who work in Parliament at the moment, who want to go into an agency role, you've already got something that somebody that hasn't worked in Parliament has got, and that is they are the political connections. They are a background knowledge on how parliamentary procedure works, how you've seen campaigns coming into an MP's inbox. So you, I think, do have an advantage. I'll leave the recruitment advice to Alec, but I do think you do have an advantage into seeing how Westminster works, and that's certainly what helped me go from a parliamentary researcher into agency. I think I'm going to sound like a broken record, I think, Katie, but I think in order to be able to do that, I think, particularly in these difficult times, I think you just need to be bolshy. Perhaps I've spent most of my life being bolshy growing up not far from you, Katie, and we're good old South East Londoners. But you do need to be slightly bolshy and be proud in the fact that you will have some experience that people already don't have when you're trying to get into the agency world. I started as an account manager at Portland. And the fact that I was an ex-local councillor, I'd worked for a minister slightly when Stephen Hammond was a minister, but also a backbench MP, meant that agency wanted to know the intel that I had working in Parliament over the 3 years that I did, but also the fact that I had that knowledge on how parliamentary procedure works and how legislation might get through, and how you might have met some organisations through working for an MP at that time, is invaluable knowledge, and agencies really want that so that you can provide that background information. So I think that you shout out loud and proud about the fact that you have worked in Parliament, because that means that a lot of those companies will want that experience coming forward.
I agree with you, and don't be afraid to be different, because if we were all the same, life would be boring. And the fact is that in comms, you have to communicate with lots of different people in lots of different communities in lots of different ways. And so don't think you don't have anything to add just because you're not like everybody else. I turned up the Conservative Party 2 decades ago, and one of the first things I said to them on the way in was, do I need elocution lessons? Because I don't sound like everybody else in this room. And my boss said to me, this is brilliant. No, because thank God we've found some other people that don't all sound the same and don't all look the same and don't all, come from the same kind of backgrounds. And I made it my thing, my niche, that I was completely different from everybody else. And therefore I wanted to be memorable. I wanted to be known as hardworking, a bit of a grafter, as it were. And that's, find your niche, find your way forward. Remember what it is your USP is, and bang on about it. Don't be shy at all. Colby, I want to come to you next. It's a really good question in from Rory again. Do you see a trade-off between in-house and agency in terms of developing your career in the long term? Does one necessarily lead to more options later, for example?
It's a good question, and I think it's really up to you. So it's never really a case of one is better than the other. It can probably depend on where you are in your career, what kind of experience you're looking for. Agency is always great because it gives you a portfolio of potential clients to work with. It broadens your horizon. It can let you dip in and out and really sort of be at the crux of things. When you're in-house, you're probably all focused on, that business that you're involved in. And as much as you're doing communications, you're also equally, if not more, involved in the business. And the priority has to be the business as much as the communications, the public affairs, the lobbying and everything else. So they're very different asks. Different skills get developed and learned by being in those environments, but they're both equally important. So you can move from one to the other. But I also just want to touch on that last part that Katie and Paul were both making about being, yourself, really. No one can ever say that I've been anyone else in any environment. I've been me. I am a very proud CiC. I'm a proud Londoner. I'm proud to have done 27 years ago, started my degree in architecture. But who would have thought it would have led me to being involved in management consultancy, working for Boris, being vice chairman of the party, fighting general elections, local elections, working in global businesses. You can plot your own path. And probably the biggest challenge we have is ourselves. And this sounds like a cliche because everyone does say it to people, but it's yourself that will determine how far you want to go and what you want to try. I wanted to write for a national newspaper, and I wanted to write about politics. I had no background in it. I had no experience in it. So I wrote to everybody, and none of them even replied. But then I got an answer from an Asian national newspaper, and I wrote for it for 3 years, a weekly political column. Now, what did that do for me? It really honed my thinking. From the position of thinking I knew something about writing columns, I then realized I knew nothing about writing columns, and then went on a journey of learning to write things. So by doing things, you learn as well. So don't worry that sometimes people think, I need to know how to do this thing before I can do it. Try it, and you'll also learn a lot by doing it. So sorry, answering a different question, but a couple of points there, Katie.
No, I think they're really, really useful points. There's a question in from Callum in terms of the transfer of skills from being someone that works inside an agency in terms of them becoming a special advisor. And it doesn't matter what way around you did it. Anita, can I bring you in there in terms of those relationships, the skill sets that you need for both? I mean, when I worked in government, I felt like I should offer a refund to some of the people that I previously offered my services to when I told them that I knew how government worked, because I didn't really know how government worked until I got inside there and thought, God, these people are quite influential. Oh, I didn't realise how this worked. I didn't realise the power struggle here. And, it's a very different place to be. And so, Anita, if you can come in and talk to us about the relationship between the two, is it great to have agency experience before you become a SPAD? Is it great to have SPAD experience before you work in agency?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm biased here, so I may cede the ground to Paul, because my view is that fundamentally it's really hard outside government to understand how government works. And I've worked with Sam in Cabinet Office and also, and so she'll know this too from her years as a civil servant and then as a SPAD, that really understanding who pulls the levers is quite hard to determine from the outside. So I personally think that having been in government in some guise just really helps you to understand Whitehall. I think, Paul, maybe if you want to say a bit more about the things that you think, being an agency helps you to do as a SPAD. I mean, the one thing I think it does help you do is properly appreciate business and properly appreciate the ways in which the subtle signals that you send out can really move mountains outside of government, partly because they don't know how it works. And so I think it makes you much more sensitive and more alive to the contacts you have outside of Whitehall, because I think in Whitehall you can get very in your head. The one thing I would say that I think is a really positive development is the government is thinking quite differently about how it recruits special advisors, and I think that there's much more of an open door. I mean, it's not wide open, but it's much improved, and there are more formal channels. So if it is something that interests you, like, don't be shy and don't wait for someone to get in touch and see if you'd be interested. You can do that now and proactively approach government.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I think Anita's absolutely right. So when I worked with Anita, I remember we were in the same department for a while. Getting in as a special advisor when we went in was incredibly hard. It was all about who you knew and who could put in a good word for you. That's slightly changed now. I don't think it's changed far enough, but it has changed. I think the skills that require you to go from agency into becoming a special advisor, I think if you work in agency, you gain three massive skills. I think firstly, staying awake at all hours and worrying about being multifaceted in what you are dealing with at one time. Katie, you'll remember, because we worked in the same administration, you even more than me, about the fact that you would be dealing with 12 things at once. And, your boss and your principal might phone you up at 20 to 11 at night because suddenly there's something coming up at 4 o'clock tomorrow morning. So that kind of ability to be multifaceted in how you approach things, in how you approach your work, I think that you get in agency really sets you up well to be a special advisor. But also managing different teams from different disciplines. When you're a special advisor, you're required to lead meetings yourself with people who are from different directorates in your department. That ability to, kind of unplug your brain and plug it into another section to be able to think about how something that's being cooked up in your department is going to be presented to the outside world, which is a lot easier than explaining it to a lot of brilliant civil servants in the department, and they are brilliant, is something that I think agency gives you in a really unique way. So I think working in agency probably is the most beneficial way to which you can then go in and become a special advisor.
I'd second that without a shadow of a doubt. And also, sometimes you become a jack of all trades, a master of none. And so if you do have a specialism as well, and you have a particular interest or something you are, that is your forte, then that is a really added bonus, because sometimes I felt that, God, I was across everything and yet not really across anything, because they all come at you at the speed of light. And so if there's particular areas of interest, then developing those as part of your career, I think, is a massive added bonus. I'm going to get shouted at soon because I've gone slightly over my time in terms of the panel discussions. We've already introduced your panelists, so hopefully you'll recognise the faces as you are put into your panel room. Finley's going to do the good deed now, and I'm going to see you back here just before 7 to wrap up. So hopefully you are all being directed to your breakout rooms now, and it should all happen by magic, because I don't know what I'm doing. Good work.
So I think everybody should be assigned, if Craig and who had it.
It worked. Well, great. I think most of you are back.
Well, yeah.
Been struggling in, but hello. Thank you very much for coming back and sticking with us. I hope your breakout sessions were useful. I want to say thank you to those people that were running those breakout sessions, because again, they're giving up their time. They're very busy people, so I'm very grateful for that. Just a couple of things to highlight. First of all, that mentoring session that we talked about earlier, that is now available in your chat. The link is there, so please do take advantage of it if you're interested. What I would say is that this is going to go out in the next few days to the newsletter, to the wide membership list. So the fact that you've attended this session means that you get to go on it first. And it is a bit of first come, first serve in terms of there are only so many people that we can pair up. So if you are interested in it, you might get ahead of the game, which is great. So hopefully that'll be useful to you. I want to thank the panelists as well, because it was really interesting to hear from the questions at the beginning. And if you asked a question, thank you, because it would have been really boring if I just spoke to myself for half an hour before the session started. So I do hope that you felt that this session was genuinely interactive, that it was useful, and that you will come back for more in the future, because we'd love to do more of this style of events again in future. I will take one last plug to say I am hiring. I've put my details in the chat function, so do get in touch. I'd like to thank Adam and Finley again, because they organised all of this. Adam puts in so much work behind the scenes, and Finn as well, to make sure this all runs really well, to make sure we do what we're told to do, and we massively appreciate it, so thank you. And before, I'm going to look at Finn to make sure that I haven't missed anything before I wrap up. But otherwise, I think I said thank you to everybody, and I really enjoyed it. We'd love to have your feedback from the session, by the way, because it'll encourage other people in the future that if you found it useful, if you found it helpful, do drop us a line, because we'll be able to put that in the newsletter, and we'll be able to hopefully spread it wider next time for all different kinds of events that we want to run in the future. I'm going to sign off, going to leave you to your evenings. I hope you've got a glass of wine on standby. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and I hope to see you again soon.